All right, let's get started on 83410-4, Economy A. And your essential question on your Cornell notes is, what is the connection between European colonialism and globalization? Before we can answer that question, we need to define a few things. The first thing is colonialism. Colonialism is the policy of a nation seeking to extend or retain its authority over other people or territories. Examples of this are when the British colonized the United States, or Canada, or India, or any of the other multiple countries that they colonized. But the British weren't the only ones. We also had the French and the Portuguese and the Spanish. We know from Latin America the Spanish and the Portuguese took over most of that region. So our next word, well, actually, back to this. What is the purpose of colonialism? Its general purpose is developing or exploiting a colony to the benefit of the mother country economically. So really the purpose of colonizing an area is to make money. And its secondary purpose is helping the colonies modernize in terms that are defined by the colonizers, especially in economics, religion, and health. So this is where we see a lot of missionary work going on. When European countries brought Christianity around the world, they thought that they were helping the people of those colonies be better people by having a different religion. The other word we need to define is globalization. And the definition of globalization is the increasing interaction of people, states, or countries through the growth of the international flow of money, ideas, and culture. So really, globalization is making the world smaller because now we have access to more interaction of people and governments. So it's mostly an economic process, and that's how it started. But it also has social and cultural impacts. There are three types of globalization: economic, cultural, and political. Economic globalization is the free movement of goods, capital, services, technology, and information. So when you think about the internet, that's globalization. We can connect with people around the world that way. When we buy things that are made in China or Vietnam or India or in the United States, that is an economic globalization example. Cultural globalization refers to the spreading of ideas, meanings, and values around the world in such ways to extend and intensify social relations. Colonization helps spread culture around the world. You know from earlier lessons that one of the reasons English is spoken in almost every country throughout the world is because of globalization and because of colonization. And same thing with religion. The reason that Christianity is practiced worldwide is because of European colonization. In some cases, cultural globalization has resulted in one of three things. The first thing is hybridization. Basically, that means mixing or blending of cultures, which is why in the United States you see, or anytime you're hungry, you can get a variety of different cultural or ethnic foods. Homogenization is a result sometime, and that is when individual cultures are destroyed and a monoculture or one culture is left in its place. Some people refer to Western culture as this, that many countries around the world are becoming more and more like Western culture. And then we have cultural intensification. This basically means that instead of people getting along better because we have more information about each other, that it actually causes conflict between people from different cultures. The third type of globalization is political globalization, and this refers to the growth of the worldwide political system, both in size and complexity. And this basically just means that all the parts of government between countries start working together. So the political system includes the national governments, so the governments of each of the countries. Those countries' governmental and intergovernmental organizations, examples of those would be the United Nations and NATO, as well as government independent elements of society, such as international non-governmental organizations. An example of that would be Doctors Without Borders. They work between different countries throughout the world. And then also social movement organizations like PETA, or the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. We won't spend too much time on political globalization, though. So back to our original question, what is the connection between colonialism and globalization? Now, Europe is our region, so we have to stick to that. Europeans did not invent globalization, and they didn't invent colonization either. But by colonizing Latin America, Africa, Asia, and Australia, they helped to link more markets around the world. By owning colonies, they had access to cheaper raw materials. They could get cotton or corn or coffee or gold or silver or oil cheaper because they owned those countries. Basically, they were cutting out the middleman. They created a new source of cheap, or in some cases free labor, when we look at slavery that they brought to the United States. And European colonies also spread ideas and technology around the world. So wherever they went, whoever they traded with, whoever they colonized, they brought their ideas and then took ideas from those places and brought them back to Europe. Globalization hasn't always been a positive thing for European colonies and territories, even after they gained independence. And we know that when we look at places that used to be European colonies. If you look at most of South America, they're still developing countries. They have not been fully developed. While globalization has radically increased incomes and economic growth in developing countries and lowered consumer prices in developed countries, it also changes the power balance between developing and developed countries and affects the culture of each country. And we know that colonialism helped create an unequal power balance between the mother country and the colonized country. And globalization has, in a lot of cases, continued this trend because those developing countries have something that the developed countries want. And as long as it's cheap, the developed countries don't really have that much of an interest in helping those countries get out of whatever situations they're in. On the other hand, like this top bullet says, in a lot of countries, people now have jobs because there are factories and call centers and whatever the case may be, providing jobs that weren't there before. So go ahead and write your summary. And again, your question is, what is the connection between European colonialism and globalization?